You know, it's always strange to me when the Xbox Series X loses direct face-offs via Digital Foundry on new games. Like, you can understand it a little bit if they were like older games or if they were certain type of games or whatever, but these games a lot of the times now are specifically marketed with Xbox and through Xbox. And in this case, it's a situation where Xbox is supposed to be the lead platform as well. So it's a little bit strange when you see that. And they also have such a good relationship with EA. It's very strange to see the game run like complete garbage. And I realize it probably runs pretty trash on both the Xbox Series X and PS5, but according to Digital Foundry, it was much less of a train wreck on PS5, which is a bit surprising to say the least. But this is going to be something that I'm sure you guys are going to want to pay attention to. It's a video and a topic you're not going to want to miss. Hey there everyone, I'm the Crapgamer, and of course this is Crapgamer Reviews, your home for gaming news, opinions, reviews, and much more. You'll probably notice some changes around here, but that shouldn't stop you from giving us a like and possibly even consider subscribing if you've not already done so. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some of your free time with me and my silly YouTube video channel. Yeah, that's right. Thank you guys. Happy holidays, all that good stuff. Hopefully you guys are spending some time with your family, having some good times, and maybe shopping or eating or, you know, all that good stuff. It's awesome. So anyway, talking about the differences between the Xbox Series X version and the PlayStation 5 version of the Battlefield 2044 game. Yeah, very interesting to say the least. Now, it's sort of a weird situation because this game apparently, and just to be clear, I have no horse in this race. I couldn't care less about Battlefield. I'm not a Battlefield fan, but I just find it odd that, you know, a game that's marketed with Xbox and is designed as Xbox as the lead platform is having so much trouble. So Battlefield 2042, both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X have a 60 frames per second mode for resolution, dynamic 4K with checkerboard rendering. The PlayStation 5 60 frames mode, it's 60 frames 98.59% of the time, while on the Xbox Series X it's 60 frames 98.33% of the time. Lowest frame rate on the PlayStation 5 would be 50 frames per second. Lowest frame rate on the Xbox Series X is 46 frames per second, and it actually dropped down to 0 just due to frame rate spike a couple of times. So that's something that is unfortunate to see that happening. But Digital Foundry and Eurogamer, of course, we're talking about it. Performance needs work in 128 player modes on all consoles, but the biggest issue right now are the big frame rate stutters, which often becomes full pauses, which only seem to happen on Xbox Series X, which, you know, is a very interesting thing to see because, you know, they offer VRR and things like that. So performance-wise, there's the same. Frame rate isn't quite where it should be, particularly in the new 128 modes in terms of resolution. Both PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X target 4K at 60 frames, dropping to 1800p. In busy scenes, a wider DRS window can't be ruled out, of course, but that's where the counts took us. By large, and though drops from the largest resolutions are relatively rare, but they both turn in a sharp and stable image that looks great on a 4K TV. Series S, it seems to vary between 1080p and 1296p based on their tests, with the junior Xbox presenting a blurrier image and some reductions to effects like foliage and density. Performance tends to vary according to player count. The modes with 64 players and below, such as hazards and portal modes, seem to run great on all current gen platforms. On Series X and S and PS5, the readout is 60 frames per second on each console, with only occasional single frame rate drops, essentially undetectable in the run of play. These modes feel great to play with, and though the scope is much smaller than the 128 player battle mayhem of the main game, it's actually here where we have problems with all consoles, dropping performance in intense battles, particularly with many players present or when flying aircraft. On the PlayStation 5 and Series S, these problems aren't too bad. There is generally a pretty solid 60 frames with occasional dips. It's not ideal, but it's very playable, and these problems are not a major impediment to the experience. At its lowest, we see readouts in the low to mid 50s during more intense gameplay. There's some occasional stutter on all consoles though, but it seems worst on Series X, where the 50 millisecond pauses occur regularly, although these can last just for 0.04 of a millisecond at worst. Thankfully, there is sort of a solution to the performance problems if you can accept some compromises. You can download the Xbox One and PS4 versions on the PS5 and Series consoles, and enjoy a nigh on faultless 60 frames per second in the large player count modes, although you only get a maximum of 64 players on these versions. Unlike most Xbox Series titles, it is possible to download and play these on the base Xbox One version of the game, even if you have purchased the Series version, presumably to allow Series owners to hang out with friends who have not yet upgraded to the latest and greatest machines. The graphical downgrade isn't too bad, though you'll miss out on some enhanced foliage and high-res textures of current gen, as well as screen space reflections, high-res shadows, and a handful of other improvements on the maps. While smaller, they do still manage to feel empty with 64 players. So again, this is a very interesting thing, because you expect Microsoft's console, being the lead platform and the official console of the Battlefield game, to actually go out there and perform well, but it seems like it's just struggling to do anything, and that's a real shame, because even though I'm not a huge fan, I know there's a lot of Battlefield fans on Xbox, so to see that kind of come up and be an issue, I feel like is a huge problem for Microsoft. And what can be actually done about this? I think that's the bigger question that people need to ask. Like, I don't really know. Like, we could sit there, and I used to make fun of the tools and stuff like that. I don't really think this is a tool issue. I think this is just an issue with some developers and things like that. But when you've got a console that, that's $550 with tax, and it's getting outperformed by a $400 console, I think that that's a bit of an issue, and something that you kind of scratch your head a little bit about. I'm hoping that as we get further into year two, it can separate itself a little bit, at least have some issue, like less issues. Like, you'd be okay with it, like, because all games are gonna, the optimization process could come up with issues, and of course there was a pandemic that could have arose with some issues, and that stuff can all be patched out and stuff like that. But you would expect some of these bigger issues like this to not be as prevalent, especially on the more powerful hardware like the Xbox Series X. So it just really, to me, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And I do think that some people are probably going to make a much bigger deal out of this than it is, but to me it just seems a little bit frustrating as an Xbox fan and Xbox owner, that this literally keeps on happening time and time again, and it just doesn't it doesn't really kind of bode well, in my opinion. Like, Xbox is such a great platform, such a great experience. I do think that I do think that people will probably come away with it regardless of how you feel about Xbox, and just look at this as a way to hate on the console. I'm not doing that. I think that Xbox is fine, and this will be patched in no time. That's always funny, right? It's like, to me, when these things happen, it's almost always like a story running a newspaper, right? They'll print a retraction a few days later, but on the last page of page G, page 12, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, the game will get patched on Xbox and it'll run fine in a couple weeks from now, but it's just this one particular point where we see this actually happening, and it's kind of unfortunate. And you're going to see people kind of brag about it and talk about it, and for me it's just like, kind of just scratch my head and say, I don't understand. It's not really worth bragging about, but it is a little bit frustrating, to say the least, just as a fan. So with that being said, I'm going to link all this. I'll link the video to Digital Foundry, and also link the Eurogamer article where it talks about it. If you just would rather read about it for yourself, let me know. Anyway, have a great holiday. Rack 'em up, fact 'em up, Crapgamer 'em up. Crapgamer out.